Welcome to the Nerdstalgic Podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Hello, Beans. Hope you're well. Hope you're all good as per usual. I'm doing well. I'm really well. I'm actually really excited because this is the beginning of season 2. I'm using the new mic. I've got the better quality. I'm in a better mood. It's 2023. Sadly, we are technically living in the future and there are no hover cars and we haven't met any aliens as of yet recording this. Who knows what 2023 might hold, but as of yet it's a bit disappointing, but technically we're in the future and I'm feeling good and I hope you're all feeling good as well. There's no promo, so I'm going to get straight into it, but I do want to say before I begin, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod to keep up to date on everything and anything that I am reviewing or looking at or watching or reading or any sort of thing like that, really. Just follow me on there. You'll be updated on everything that I'm doing. Also, don't forget to subscribe to me on YouTube. If you're currently listening to this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, comment, and all that jazz. If you haven't done so, please do. I really appreciate it. It really helps. And so today we're going to be talking about the Callisto Protocol. Came out at the 2nd of December. I didn't get it till Christmas Day, so this review is going to be late. But I, to be honest, in my opinion, I think it's to my benefit that I'm playing it later than it actually came out, because for anybody who doesn't know, this game came out with a lot of bugs and a lot of issues, and it's kind of the reason why I don't play games day one anymore, because, well, nowadays it's not like it was when I was younger. When I was younger, when you had a game, not every game was like, I'm not saying that every game ever came out when I was younger like was perfect. There were games that came out broken, but there was that level of polish that you got what you got. At the end of the day, there was no updates or anything like that. Like, if the game was crap, the game was crap. But if the game worked, the game worked, and that was it, really. And it wasn't until like the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 sort of era when like games could be updated later on. And it's that kind of mentality of we'll fix it in post, we'll fix it after. And it's that fact of I just don't like that. So it's made me really wary now of big blockbuster games. I don't like buying day one. I'd rather let the game release, look at the reviews. Let's see what people think, see if there's any issues, if there's any great game-breaking bugs. Because I've been burnt many times. I was burnt on Anthem, because again, I'm a big fan of BioWare, I'm a big fan of Mass Effect and Dragon Age. So in my sort of mind was like, well, BioWare's never failed me before, so why would they fail me now? So I pre-ordered Anthem, only to get burnt. So there's that. And then I did the same with Cyberpunk 2077. Again, I'm a big fan of the Witcher series. I've played all of the Witcher games since Witcher 2. I love CG Project Red. Again, I love Gwent. I played their Gwent game that they brought out. I've even got Gwent on my phone. I've got Gwent on my computer. Big fan of them. So again, it's the same thing with BioWare. It's the fact of, well, they've never let me down before, so why should they let me down now? And then again, we all know how Cyberpunk 2077 was. And again, the story goes on, how many times I've bought games and I've been burnt day one because the game's been broken or it's just sucked, right? So, there's that. But also the fact of I just tend to stay away from day one games, in not just for that, just the fact of I'd rather just wait. My backlog is so huge that I just don't have time for any new blockbusting games. Like, I'd have to wait until they come down in price, then I'll probably get them again, because of the whole idea of them being broken. I'd rather let them be broken at first and then wait until all the updates come out and then play it when it's fixed. So there's that. But I finally got around to playing it. I got it Christmas Day. Finally got around to playing it, and this is my thoughts. So before I get into it, I'm going to have a bit of a story time, because it's been a while since I've done one. This game was created by Striking Distance, which is a brand new studio, which is the lead developer. The lead owner, the CEO of the company, is a man called Glenn Schofield, who co-created the Dead Space games when he was at Visceral Studios. And it's kind of funny because when this game was being sort of advertised when it first shown at the Game Awards and you saw a few trailers, it did look very Dead Spacey, and that's kind of what pulled me in. Because I'm a big fan of the Dead Space series. I came into Dead Space quite late, if I'm being completely honest, because um, when I was a young bean, when Dead Space came out around 2007, 2008, I like horror movies. I grew up on horror films, but again, it's one of those sort of things where I didn't play scary games because I knew it'd be a waste on me because I'd get too scared and I would never complete it, and again, it'd be just a waste of money. So I finally, booked up the courage a couple of years ago, I think 2018, when I was in university, and I figured, why not? These games I've been told are masterpieces. People told me how good they are. The franchise is amazing. So much good press. And I figured, you know what, I'd give them a go. So I finally sat down, played them, terrified, loved them. I like I even now, like I'm still planning to go back and replay them. Like my birthday is the 28th of December. On the 23rd of this, my birthday's on the 28th of January, sorry. And on the 23rd of January, this game, I think it's the 23rd, 22nd of January, Dead Space remake gets released. So that kind of works in tandem. I wanted to go back with that series and look more into it. But I want to read the books. I've read all the comics. Like I'm in love with that series and franchise. Sadly, the third game wasn't as good as the first or second one. But you had the gore, you had the horror, you had the fantastic tension, the jump scares, the creature designs, everything about it was just mwah, chef's kiss. It was just perfect, and I loved it. And I'm glad I finally got into it. It was just a shame of when I got to the third game. I for one actually enjoyed the third game, but sadly that game didn't do very well, mainly because they completely went left field with it and decided to go like a co-op focus sort of game and microtransaction the hell out of it, and then it didn't do very well, and EA basically shelved the Dead Space franchise, and then Visceral went off to do the Star Wars like Han Solo type sort of rebel sort of game, and then that got canned, and then Visceral Studios got shut down, and yeah, the rest is history. So for a long time, I was kind of a bit like I was hankering. I had a urge. I had a hunger for Dead Space type games, and I feel like there's not that many out there, really, not many good ones anyway. So when Callisto Protocol came around and it was advertised as like this predecessor of the Dead Space franchise, it had one of the co-creators on the team, running, doing the story and working on the gameplay. And I looked at the first trailer and it blew me away. And everything just about this sort of game screamed Dead Space, but next gen. Because I feel like if Dead Space 4 was to be made, it probably would have came out on Xbox One and PlayStation 4. And I feel like that generation sorely missed this survival horror. Like we had Alien Isolation, but I mean like survival horror in terms of the Dead Space is sort of cut off the limbs and brutal and visceral and gore, and it was cruelly missing that sort of game. So to finally get it now in this generation, at the beginning of this generation, was again very sort of heartwarming and very sort of it pulled me in, because as everybody knows, I love my gore and I love my visceral, pardon the pun, my visceralness of all the bits, the body bits and the blood, and the really funky sort of H.P. Lovecraft type sort of monsters. I love it, in the tentacles and all that. Absolutely amazing. Like it's right up my alley. So this was probably my most anticipated game of 2022. It was a game I was really looking forward to. It was on track to come out. There was no delays. Like generally, like everything about this game just felt like a winner. And then it came out, and it had not like it had somewhat positive reviews, but again, it needed a lot of work, a lot of patches. There was a lot of issues, and I knew I was getting it for Christmas, so I knew either way I was going to get it and play it. But if I wasn't getting it for Christmas, again, I won't lie, that probably would have put me off for a bit longer, till a few more patches, probably till their big February patch that they're going to do. It would have put me off till then. But no, I finally got it. and I finally played it. And this is my thoughts and feelings of that game. So, without further ado, we take a quick break, and we'll get into the review, shall we? Right, so where to begin? I think I'm going to start with story and characters. So, well, basically, I don't want to ruin anything. I don't want to do any, as you all know, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that I don't like to do spoilers. I don't like to ruin anything for anybody. So, all I will say in terms of the story is what's written on the back of the box. But also, before I say that, I will say one other thing, which is if you've played the Dead Space games, you know the story. And that's all I will say on that one. I'll just leave that there for you to kind of molder over. If you haven't played the Dead Space games, then I will read the back of the box, and that should kind of give you somewhat of a thought. There's not much, to be honest, on the back of the box. I know I usually, whenever I do my other sort of game reviews, I tell you about what's happening on the covers. There's not much going on the front cover. Just the Callisto Protocol, and you've got the main character on the front. And on the back it says, "Fear takes no prisoners." And then there's a quick blurb, which one of the issues I have with most modern games nowadays is just the fact of they just used to have a whole paragraph of like what the story was, and you'd have like a more in-depth, more in paragraph in the manuals. So nowadays we don't get manuals because we're trying to stay sort of green and recycle and use less paper, which I completely understand. But then that kind of leaves no room on the back to kind of really give the person, the purchaser, any idea what's going on. But all it says on the back, it goes, "On Jupiter's dead moon, a mysterious outbreak has thrown Black Iron Prison into chaos. Fight to survive the unspeakable horrors of Callisto and uncover its dark secrets." And yeah, I don't really want to say much more about the story. But what I will say, my thoughts on it, it's quite good. It's quite interesting. Like, as I've mentioned, I have played the Dead Space games, so there were a few moments where I was like, I've seen that before. That's familiar. That makes sense. I wouldn't say it was a copy. I wouldn't say it's plagiarism, anything like that. This is completely like a brand new sort of story, but it has familiar sort of beats and moments where I'm like, okay, I know that beat. I know that drum. I understand what's going on. I get it. It all clicks because I've seen it before. But I still found myself enjoying it, and still found myself being pulled in. And that if there was a sequel, or if they wrote books, or they did a comic book sort of series, I would happily sit and play or sit and read because I am interested in this world's lore. They have done a prequel sort of series on Spotify. I think it's called the Callisto Protocol Paradox or something like that. I have yet to really properly give it a sit and listen to. When I do, I'll let you folks know on Twitter what I thought. But I am interested in this world. The story interests me. As for the characters, yes and no. The characters that you've got Josh Duhamel as Jacob, Karen Fukuhara as Danny, Zeke Alton as Elias, and Sam Whitworth. Sam Whitworth, who is basically, if you've played Star Wars Force Unleashed, it's that guy. Or he's in Days Gone as well. He plays Captain Ferris. Now, in terms of the characters, all of them are really sort of not that interesting apart from Elias. And I'll get on to him in a minute. So you've got Josh Duhamel as Jacob, who is your main character, who's the character you can be playing through the whole game. He's a pilot who gets given a rough deal, gets double-crossed, and gets thrown into Black Iron Prison. You've got Karen Fukuhara, who plays Danny. Again, she is a terrorist who got you stuck in prison, also got herself stuck in the prison as well. So you've got her. Her character's interesting, but she doesn't get interested until the end. For majority of the time of the story, she is such a knobhead. Like, she literally is horrible. She's a dick to your character, to Jacob, all the way through. So she's kind of hard to really care for and really be interested and really root for at any time, even when the game wants you to sort of care for her and love her. You kind of get to the point where it's like, well, no, she's been a knobhead to me for most half of the game. So now you're telling me to be friends with her. It's kind of hard, but you know. Then you have Zeke Alton, who plays Elias. To be honest, I would much rather have played this whole game as Elias because his story is more interesting. So again, like I said, Jacob, he got double crossed. He was a pilot who was delivering supplies, got double crossed, crash landed on the planet, we got stuck in prison, and his characters are very not that interesting. Um, uh, he's a bit sort of dreary, really. There's not much to him, really. He's just like a slab of meat in terms of this game. That kind of makes sense because how visceral and gory it is. But I'll get on to that bit in a minute. But there's not much to him. There's no substance to the main character. I didn't feel myself connected to him. Yes, he's Josh Duhamel, but he's Josh Duhamel. Josh Duhamel's a fantastic actor, but he's like I don't feel any connection to him. I don't feel like that character's me. I feel like I'm playing as Josh Duhamel. That's one of the issues that I had about this game, and again, I'll bring that up later on. But as for the character he's playing, Jacob, again, I'm just not that interested. I don't care much about him. But Elias, on the other hand, Elias is an inmate that you meet in the prison, and you set him free. And basically, Elias he made a mistake when he was younger. It's not really spoilers. He tells you eventually in the story, but basically, Elias, he made a mistake when he was younger, and that got him stuck in prison. And that he's been there most of his life, and he's been trying to find his way out, and he's been trying to plans and try to work different ways to kind of break out the prison. But again, it's a supermax prison on a nice moon. So there's a lot of sort of things to it, and he's never been able to do it on his own. He's never been able to get anybody to help him. Finally, the outbreak in the prison happens, and that he sees this as his chance to kind of escape. And he has Jacob help him sort of escape, and they kind of work together to get out. And for the most part of the game, Elias is in your ear, constantly telling you, where to go. Just giving you moral support. Like he sounds like a really sort of decent sort of bloke, that he's sort of trying to atone for his issues, and that he really wants to help Jacob escape because, help me help you. He's not a bad guy. He's just a guy that made a mistake, but he wants to do good. He's really, really interesting, and it kind of makes me laugh. Like I remember when you first saw the promo sort of footage for this game, when it was being advertised at the Game Awards, that I'm sure, and if I'd have to look back and check, but I'm 100% sure that Elias was the main character in all of those promo sort of videos and shots, was his character on screen. And I'm sure it was him. It wasn't Josh Duhamel. I think that was a late sort of addition. And it kind of I don't know this for 100% sure, but it kind of makes me think of maybe Elias was the original main sort of character, but they just decided to bring in blockbuster stars to kind of pump up sort of, people wanting to play it. Again, I don't know that for sure. It's never been sort of confirmed. It just seems a bit strange where you never saw anything about Josh Duhamel or any sort of the high ranking sort of like actors until near to the end of production, or when this game was sort of being ramped up because it was releasing like last year, that you actually saw that. Otherwise it was sort of Elias, Zeke Alton's character. But I would much rather have played as Zeke. I would much rather play as an inmate that did wrong, is now stuck in the high max security prison. An outbreak happens, and I've got to try and find a way to escape while trying to uncover what also happened as well. I would have much rather played that story. I found myself caring more for Elias. I would rather have been Elias. It's just a shame that we couldn't be him. You know what I mean? So, apart from Elias, a lot of other characters quite drab. I haven't really mentioned much about Captain Ferris. He's also one of the sort of main adversaries, one of the main villains of the sort of the story. And Sam Witwerth does a good job at the character. Again, he's Sam Witwerth. He's done a lot of. He's a good actor, and he's done a lot of these sort of games, sort of where he's been in video games and stuff like that. So he knows what he's doing. But again, it's a fact of his character that he's playing, again, is one note. He starts off where he seems like just like sort of, not warden, but like the head of security for the prison. He seems very much of like, just doing my job. And then out of nowhere, completely left field, again, like Danny, he's just a knobhead for no reason. He's like, he doesn't listen to anything that Jacob has to say to him, anything like that. He's literally like, oh yeah, you crash landed, I'll help you get to safety and all that, no problem. And then as soon as like he's given the order to basically arrest Jacob for no reason, just to arrest him, he basically just treats him like he's shit on the bottom of his shoe and couldn't care less. And then for the rest of the story, it's just a knobhead. And it's there's no reason for it. There's no reason for Danny not to like Jacob. There's no reason for Captain Ferris not to like him. The only person that likes him is Elias. But the problem is the fact of Elias is the only decent character, and that the player, would rather not play as Jacob because Jacob is boring. He is just, well, the Josh Jamal does a good job at acting. Like he plays the role fantastically. Again, Josh Jamal is a fantastic actor. It's just the writing for the character is terrible, and the character himself is not that good. But I feel like by the end of the story, we finally see a bit actually of who Jacob is and what Jacob stands for. But by the time we finally get to that point, the story ends. This is where I come back to my point, is the fact of I would happily, when we come back to in terms of story, I would happily play a sequel, and I would happily pay for story expansions, because I know they're looking to do story expansions for this game later this summer. I'll happily pay them and play them, and I'll review them when they come out, because like we finally got around to actually understanding who Jacob is as a character, and then it just ends. So I'm interested to see more development of that. But again, I still, as of now, from the package that we get given and the story that we get and the characters that we get, as of now, I much would rather play as Elias than Jacob, and that's just how I feel about on that one. I wish I did it, but again, Elias is just the more interesting character. So moving on. As for the gameplay and gameplay mechanics, the gameplay is very melee focused. At the start of the game, you get given I wouldn't even say it's a wrench. It's just a piece of it's a hooligan tool. And if anybody doesn't know what a hooligan tool is, basically, it's like a giant oversized crowbar. So on the bottom, it's a big piece of metal. On the bottom, you have a crowbar shape for sort of crowbarring. On the top, it's got like a pick on the top. And on the other side, it's like a claw. And basically, it's used by the fireman service as like a multi-tool so that it can do many different jobs. It's called the hooligan tool because, what it can do. And you get given one of those, and the game sort of gives you a tutorial of this dodging mechanic. And this is where at first it's quite cool, and eventually it gets really stupid, because the whole idea of this dodging mechanic is the fact that if the enemy goes to swing for you with, say, like a right hook, you press the left stick left and you would dodge, and then he will move past you. And it's very cinematic. It's very sort of, he swings, you dodge, and then he will sort of swing with his, and then if the right one doesn't hit you, he'll swing with his left. You move the left stick to the right, you dodge to the right, and then it's always, again, maybe it's my autistic brain, but everything is in sequences. Our sequences of 2s or 3s. It's not until you get to the end of the game that it might ramp up to 4 or 5, but everything is a sequence of 2 or 3, right? So it's right, left, so dodge, dodge, hit, 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 dead. And then they might try to hit you again after you've hit them twice. So it's like dodge, dodge, hit, hit, dodge, dodge, hit, hit, cinematic, dead, next sort of character. Depending on sort of the different sort of enemies that you sort of face, each one of them is the fact of swipe, swipe, hit, hit, dodge, dodge, do. You know what I mean? And again, at first, it's very cinematic. It's very cool. It's very interesting. It's very sort of like, oh, this is fun. But then when you realise that apart from the big sort of mini bosses and the end boss, when you realise that majority of the enemies, like, all you have to do is just like hold the left stick, either left or right, and the enemy, then you literally would dodge every single hit. It gets a bit sort of like, stupid. I will admit, as well as sort of a bit of a disclaimer here, I did play the game on the easy difficulty, mainly because I wanted to get the game finished as quick as possible so that I can get this review out as soon as possible. But because I played the game on easy difficulty, I didn't need to dodge. The only enemies that I needed to dodge were sort of the bosses, with the boss fights. But any other enemy, I didn't have to do that, because all I had to do was like they would come hit me, and as long as I got the first hit in, and if as long as I upgraded my baton, which I did, I fully upgraded my baton with maximum damage and good sort of like you have this thing called this targeting module, which means that you can hit the enemy say a few times and then a reticle will appear on screen on the enemy so that you can quickly hold down left trigger and then quickly fire your pistol with the right trigger, and that will get a sort of shot off. That way that will stagger them so you can do a few more hits to finish them off. But because I played on easy and because I fully upgraded my baton, that I didn't need to dodge. I literally bash their brains in. Next thing you know, I've got up against the wall. I bashed them on the legs fell off, and then I'm swinging the baton, security baton, in their face. Head explodes, done. And then I'm stamping on their body for credits, and I'm turning around and I'm doing the same to his buddy, right? So if you play the game on easy and you fully upgrade yourself, you are basically a walking tank from day one. It's meant to be the fact of, you're very vulnerable at the beginning, and then as you sort of play in the game, you upgrade yourself and you get a new suit and stuff like that. You become more sort of capable, and it's very Dead Spacey. The fact of as you go through and you get your plasma cutter and you upgrade the plasma cutter and you get other weapons and you get a better sort of armor, engineer armor, and that you can carry more, that the game becomes easier. But because again I played on easy mode, I didn't need to do the dodging. I didn't need to do the bobbing and weaving. I did it at the beginning because it was fun. But eventually it was a fact of I don't need to. It's just hit. They get hit on me, but it doesn't matter if they hit me because again it doesn't do that much damage because I'm on easy mode. So I quickly ran through those sort of things. The only time I really had to dodge was when I went up against the big bosses, and yet these big enemies called two heads. And the reason they're called two heads is because, well, ironically, they have two heads, and that the idea is you can't melee them because that does nothing. They basically pick you up and like literally turn you into paste. So you have to keep a distance, and you have to shoot them in the head. And that way you shoot them in the head and they will go down, and then you get up close, you hit them with your baton, and then the second head on the right, but he realizes that the head and the arm on the left is dead, so it rips it off itself, and then it charges at you again. But during this sort of mini boss fight, because you can't use any melee, you have to shoot, dodge, shoot, dodge, while also being surrounded by other enemies. So it's a fact of trying to dodge and shoot the enemy while also trying to pay attention to what's going on around you with other enemies. Again, because I played on easy, it wasn't so hard. I guess if you played the game on maximum security difficulty or medium difficulty, then that challenge would be there, and the need to dodge more would be there. But I didn't feel like it was needed when I played on easy difficulty. Again, I did it to get the review out as soon as possible. But in terms of the actual gameplay mechanics, it's fun, but it's like it gets annoying after a while, and the camera doesn't really help as well when you've got this dodge mechanic, and that the level design is built in such a way that everything is very sort of tight and in small sort of corridors, so the camera doesn't have room to breathe. So it's the fact of I'm focused on this one enemy, trying to dodge and weave and trying to get my hits off, and there's a guy behind me that I can't see because the camera's sort of like the wall is covering the half of the camera, so I don't see this guy behind me. Luckily for me, when I was playing the game, I was using the headset I'm currently using now, which is a Logitech Sorry, let me grab the box. It is a Logitech G432. The reason I got this headset is because it's got surround sound gaming, full 3D spatial awareness, which basically means that I can hear footsteps all around me. So anything that's around me, anything that is is walking behind me, if it's really far away, it will start quiet, and the closer it gets, the louder it gets. 3D. I don't know the sort of the specs. I'm not, when it comes to like sound, I'm not very good in sort of the tech. I just know how it works. But so that sort of helped in my benefit of knowing where the enemies were. So if the camera failed me, I was able to sort of still be able to pinpoint where the enemy was coming from. So once I dealt with that problem, I could quickly turn around and see where certain enemy was coming from. So in terms of sort of gameplay mechanics, it's very melee focused. You get a few weapons, but the weapons are, you want to upgrade them. You really want to upgrade them as soon as possible. You want to upgrade your bat as much as possible because that'll be what you'll be using for majority of the game. As for the weapons themselves, upgrade them. Upgrade your main pistol because your main pistol will save your ass a lot. It's probably the weapon I use the most out of the whole game. You want to upgrade that. And also upgrade your grip, which is basically you have this ability where you can pick up enemies and you can dart them across the little area, little level, and there'll be spike traps and like for some unknown reason, like the way this prison was built, like there were spike traps, literal sharp, pointy spikes on every wall, and like there are open vents with just huge blades that just no apparent reason to be in there. They're just open that you can throw enemies into, and it's very visceral, very gory, and I love it. And you can throw them in, but you want to upgrade that because when you first get it, it doesn't last very long, being able to pick enemies up, and you can't pick up from a long distance. So that you pick a bit enemy up, and if you take too long to throw it anywhere, it will basically just fall and then it will attack you. So you want to upgrade your grip, but most importantly, upgrade your baton and upgrade your starter pistol. Those two will save your life many times throughout the game. You do eventually get a shotgun, the riot gun, which is helpful, but the pistols are really good. It's just to save you in a pinch. Also, when you get round to actually fighting the mini bosses and the main boss at the end, you're gonna want to make sure that your pistol and your shotgun are fully upgraded by then. Because, like I said, you can't lose any melee, so your security baton is no good. Your main sort of point of call at that point is your gun. But also, you want to have your grip upgraded as well, because for me anyway, when I fought the boss fight at the end, I ran out of ammo and there was no enemies lying around. I'd kill them all, I'd salvage all the ammo. So luckily for me, I'd upgraded my grip functionality so that I could pick up canisters off the ground, like red barrels basically, and fire them at the boss, and that damaged him. So that if I didn't have any ammo, I could still use that, and that's how I ended up killing the boss. Was just picking up canisters from far away and throwing them at the boss, so that I can dodge and weave, run away, get some health, pick up another barrel, and do the same thing. And that's how I managed to defeat the boss, because I ran out of ammo so many times, and I forgot that I could pick up those barrels, and I kept dying. And I was like, oh well, I could pick up that barrel over there. So that's what I ended up doing. So you want to upgrade those sort of things: your baton, your starter pistol, and your grip, and then anything else afterwards if you want. I would say look into doing the riot gun as well, the shotgun, especially if you get the stability upgrade as well. That's really helpful, because this thing will just literally wander everywhere. So if you get the stability, it's a lot more easier to really get the shots off precise what you want. And especially when you come up against the two heads and you come up against the end boss, you want that accuracy. That accuracy is key, especially if you're dodging and weaving all over the place. You want to make sure that every time you finish dodging and weaving and the characters like took 2 steps back, you can quickly press like LT, aim at the character's head, and get the shots off that you need, because you can't afford, especially on high difficulty, and even on easy difficulty really, you can't afford to waste a shot. Every shot needs to count. So you just need to make sure that you just get the accuracy and everything and the damage up, and that way these bosses will be a lot easier. So that's what I recommend in gameplay mechanics. Next up, we've got graphics and music. This game is absolutely gorgeous. It has to be one of, if not the best looking games of 2023 that I have played. Like, the game is just gorgeous. Like, it's so detailed. Like, you can see the individual beads of sweat on the character's face. Like, when you get up close and personal to an enemy and you're swinging your baton, there is literally blood being sprayed and splattered all over you. Like, you are getting covered in blood. The ground's getting covered in blood, especially when you have an enemy and you've taken them down. And you can stomp on them, and you stomp on you, and you see all the blood and all this sort of you stamp on the enemy, it's just like that, and then you pick up your credits, and then you have the foot that you use to stomp has more blood on it than the other foot that didn't stomp with. It just has the splashback, and eventually, as you go through the level, that will start to, you see the blood will just start to just like drip down off you, and eventually it will all sort of like drip off you, but you'll still be sort of wet with sweat and sort of like profusely sort of tired. You can tell that Jacob is tired. And then obviously the details as well. Like I was playing an Xbox Series X as well, so I had the extra sort of horsepower to really sort of bring out this game. But I'm sure if you played it on PC, it would just look more real and realistic. Like I said, this game's very visceral, very gory. I was actually talking to Dan from Casting Views about this game. I didn't want to give him any spoilers, but he said to me, he goes, how gory is it? I'm like, well, it all depends on what you can take. It all depends on a per person basis. I really love gore and I really love horror, and like the gorier the better. I love it. Um, and Dan basically said to me, he goes, I'm not squeamish. It's just the fact of the older that he gets, the more he kind of doesn't like the gore because he feels like it might be hiding things. And I can completely understand that. I really do. I've seen it happen many times in many games where they just use the gore to hide a lot of the issues with the game. A lot of the gameplay mechanics is not that strong. So if you put in a lot of gore, it makes it look more sort of epic and better than it actually is. But one thing I will say to Dan, if you're listening, to anybody else listening, the gore is not cheap. The gore is earned. The gore is very well done. The gore again, it's very visceral. It's in your face, but there's a point to it. It makes sense. It's not just there for gore's sake. It's general. Well, I would say planned out, but then again, can you plan gore? Gore is just splatters and a lot of entrails and stuff like that. Like I said, there are giant fan blades like in the level, like again for no apparent reason. Like we know they're there in a gameplay reason. In a story and in a world context, it makes no sense. But in a story and gameplay, well, I mean, in a gameplay aspect, it's for picking up enemies and throwing them in. And with the saw blades, for example, you could pick up an enemy, throw them into the saw, and you just watch them turn into like a red mist of paste, and then especially when you get to this area where it's like a woodcutter's sort of area where there's a lot of logs, and you throw the enemies in, and they will get munched up, and then you just get like a splatter out of the funnel where the wood chippings would come out of. Instead, it's like blood and bits, and it's like obviously it doesn't make that sound. It's like sort of as you can hear the bones and the skull being ground up and then spat out of the funnel. Again, I love that kind of stuff. So for me, it was just heaven. I was in gore heaven. And so the visuals and the gore all works really well, and it's just a beautiful game, and it's very cinematic as well. They have a lot of cutscenes. Sadly, you can't skip these cutscenes. If you could, I would love it. Especially, I know they're doing a new game plus, so I hope that when the new game plus comes out, they have skippable cutscenes because some of these cutscenes are incredibly long. But it is very cinematic, especially when you're fighting enemies. There are moments where like it will go to an animation where you'll be hitting an enemy, then all of a sudden Jacob will just grab the enemy. If you're close to a wall, Jacob will grab an enemy, throw him against the wall, hit him in his kneecaps, so that the leg falls off, like the leg just gets obliterated. Again, you're fighting these zombie sort of like creatures, kind of like necromorphs from Dead Space. Because you're fighting them, they are literally just flesh, so there's not much to them. So Jacob picks them up, throws them on a wall. You hit them on the kneecap, leg gets obliterated, falls off. They they fall down as you would expect somebody was to. They would slide down because you've just taken a leg off them, and as they slide down, Jacob would then put the baton in their face, and that would then their face would just split like a watermelon, you know. And for me, I love that. I thought that was fantastic. And every time that Jacob would do something like that, I would just I would still enjoy it. After the 100th time, it would just keep getting better every time I see it. You know what I mean? There are certain times where the game can be a bit too cinematic, and so you do a cinematic, but you could still take damage, so that after the cinematic has ended, you're on low health, and then you have to quickly sort of turn around and basically beat the crap out of somebody else. They have fixed that apparently in a patch, so I didn't have that issue as much, but it was an issue that some people were facing. But overall, the graphics beautiful. Everything was beautiful. Nothing that I want to mention is the music and the sound effects are incredible. As I mentioned, I played this whole game through my headset to get that full proper gaming experience, and it works wonders. And the lighting is so well done as well. When lighting one of the things you want to do if you're going to make a video game that's a horror, one thing you have to get right is the lighting. The reason being is because lighting is your best friend. If you can get the lighting right, you can, without even having to do music, you can already set an atmosphere just by the mood lighting, right? If you have a dark, dingy hallway, well, it's just a hallway, but if you put sort of dark, you put like lights there that are flickering on and off, and you have like indirect sort of light that comes in from one side, that kind of like some areas are lit up by other areas are pitch black, but you've also got flickering lights. Already you've set the mood, you set the tension of like this place is just creepy, and then you add the music on top. It's very much the fact of this place is creepy. And the music, it works really, really well. Like you'll constantly be hearing claw marks, you'll be constantly hearing scuttering in the vents, you'll constantly be hearing creatures and monsters in the walls go. You'll constantly be hearing those really sort of noises. You'll be hearing noises of meat, of flesh, of things being devoured, of things moving around. And because I was wearing the 3D headset, I'd be turning around constantly, looking around like I can hear stuff. I can hear stuff around me, but I don't know where it's coming from. And it makes sense and no sense in the fact of the music and the sound effects all done so well, and the graphics look so well, and the lighting's done so well. But this game is a horror game that's not scary. It doesn't scare me. And I will talk about that bit more in a minute. But like, this is just one of them games where I should be terrified, but I'm not. Why am I not terrified? You've got everything in place to get me scared, but I'm not there. Why am I not there? Why am I not at that point? Like I've got a Fitbit on that measures my heart rate. Now my resting heart rate is about 65 to 70. On average, that's my resting heart rate. My heart never jumped up any higher than that through the whole time playing this game. The only time it ever went up is when I got irritated. When I was irritated, like I kept getting killed, or that the camera wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. That was the only time my heart rate went up, because I was irritated, not because I was scared, just because I was pissed off. But apart from that, my heart rate never went any higher than it normally would do when I'm resting. And that is a worry. But again, I'll get onto that in a minute. So one thing I do want to do now is I want to talk about the good, not so good, and the bad, right? So let me list off. So the good, story. Love the story. Really, really interesting. Sadly, the characters kind of let it down, but I'm interested in this lore, in this world, in the virus. The game ends on a cliffhanger, so sort of it leaves it open for story expansions and potentially a sequel. I'll be interested to see what they do next in the expansions. So for the good story, awesome, gruesome, gore, love it, fantastic, very violent. I love the violence. The melee combat is a lot of fun. Granted, the dodging's a bit sort of janky, but you get used to that, and especially if you're playing easy difficulty, the combat, it's just fun just to bash heads with like a really blunt object. I love it. And I do, whenever I play sort of zombie games, I'm always the guy that, I don't like using guns really. I'd rather be the guy with the actual, who holds the axe or holds the sort of baseball bat. I like really getting up close and personal and just causing damage. I always play as a tank anyway, so that sort of thing I love. So I love the violence. And finally, on the good, the visuals. The visuals are just out of this world gorgeous. Everything about it is just amazing. Again, one of the most beautiful games that I played in 2022, and that's saying something, because I played a Plague Tale Requiem, and I spent a good 10 minutes talking about bird poop in that sort of in that review. I spent probably the longest talking about bird poop than anybody ever has in history. And that was just because how good it looked in terms of visuals. So it says a lot when, bird poop guy over here is amazed by a game that is very gory, and how beautiful and visual sort of the game is. So that's the good. The not so good is, as I mentioned, the dodge mechanic. It's fun at first, but gets very sort of boring and very much like, if you're playing easy difficulty, you probably won't end up doing it unless you really have to in terms of the bosses, but otherwise you don't really need it. I guess on harder difficulty, maybe. Um, but again, there's no real reason to play on the higher difficulty unless you're a hardcore sort of fan. You just want to play that, but again, you don't have to. Um, the long hidden loading screens through vents. Now, obviously, as a game designer, as somebody who did game design, I understand whenever a game has a section where you're crawling through a vent, you are shimming across a ledge, or you are like there's like a two, like you're going through a cave, or you're going through two sort of really close together rock formations, and you've got to sort of squeeze through any sort of moment like that. The reason why the games put them in is to kind of it's for a loading screen basically, because the way games used to be is that to go from one section to the next, it was a visual loading screen. You finish a level, then it would say loading, and then the next level would load, and then you keep playing. But obviously, as we've gotten further, technology's got better. Players and gamers no longer want to see loading screens, but we still have to have them, because no matter how powerful the computer is or how powerful the console is, loading screens are still going to be prevalent. It's not, it's going to be probably a while until the technology gets advanced enough where we don't need them at all. But for now, we have them. So a way of getting around that, of having a loading screen but without having a loading screen, is making the character crawl through vents, shimmy across ledges, shimmy between close rocks, climbing up long ladders, that sort of thing. It's just a way to kind of circumvent having the need of an actual physical blank screen that just says loading. It's to keep you into the game, to keep the game moving, and to make you feel like there's no loading screens. But the issue is the fact of, in the way this game is, because it's so graphically intensive, it's done in the Unreal Engine. Because the game is so gorgeous, and because, like I said, it's so graphically intensive on the CPU and so graphically intensive in general, they need to do long sort of vent crawl sections. So some of these sections are 10 to 20 seconds long. Which wasn't an issue at first, but when it came to wanting to go from one section to the next, wanting to, like, you'll have, this game's very linear, which is one of the issues I have, which I'll bring up in a minute. But you do sometimes get branching paths where it's like, the game wants you to go this way, but if you go this way, you'll find some loot. So I was like, all right, I'll go this way. I'll go get some loot because I can use the loot to upgrade my weapons and so on and so forth. So I do need to do it. So I would do that, and I'd find a collectible. But to get to that collectible, to get to that loot, I'd have to go through, I'd have to sometimes shimmy through a long vent. And it's a fact of, well, at first it's like, yeah, okay, I get it. I understand what it's there for. But it comes up so many times. It's the fact of, oh, okay, this is getting a bit sort of tiresome now. And again, I understand why they have them, and they can't make them shorter, because again, the only way to kind of subjugate the loading screens would either to bring down the quality of the game, or make sort of the vent sequences longer. That way, if they were longer, then they could load more of the game, which means you'd get longer vent sequences but fewer vent sequences. So what would you prefer? More short sequences of vents, or would a few less vents but longer time spent in crawling through the vent? Which one? It's kind of that win-lose. Like, you're still going to be in the vent, but do you going to want to be in it longer, or do you want to go in one more times? You know what I mean? So there are ways around it, but you still have to do it somehow. You know what I mean? So that's the not so good. But again, I know why they do it. The other thing not so good, as I mentioned, Hollywood actors. The problem is, as soon as you put Hollywood actor, for me personally anyway, when you put a Hollywood actor into a video game, I completely disconnect from giving a shit about said characters, because I know that now they're just an actor. They're no longer a character. And I know it's kind of hard to explain, because he's probably like, hold on, Luke, wait a second, they're actors. You watch them in movies all the time. How is it that you don't feel that when you watch a film? Because if it's a film, I know that they're actors and they're playing a character in a movie, and it's a film. It's a completely different ball game. That I can see them, and I know they're human, and they're not. It's not animated, and I can just sort of like I can connect to them better. But in a movie, because they are a Hollywood actor, I know that nothing's going to happen to them if they're an actor, because the way it works is the fact of you're not going to pay somebody like Josh Duhamel, right, um, loads of money to be in your movie, be in your video game if you're just going to kill him off. You know what I mean? And it has happened. There are times where you get these high-ranking sort of actors in sort of video games, and they do get killed off. But you know, it lessens the tension for me. I care less about them, about the characters that they're playing, or I'm playing as them, because I'm playing as a Hollywood character. I'd rather play as a character that's unknown, and I would also much prefer a voice actor to actually do the role and to do the motion capture who is an unknown. Like, the guy that plays, Elias, for example. He might be a Hollywood actor. I haven't seen him in anything, but because I haven't seen him in anything, it's a blank slate. I don't know anything about him. So it's all down to his performance and him to sell it on me. And the actor sold me on it. But then when I look at this, I think, well, yeah, you can tell me that's sort of you can tell me that's Jacob, but I just see Josh Duhamel, and he looks really good for Josh Duhamel, but that's Josh Duhamel. It's the same with Sam Whitworth. It's the fact of, yeah, he's Captain Ferris, but he's also Starkiller. He's also from Days Gone. You know what I mean? Like, I see his face so much now in gaming. It's the fact of, oh, look, there he is. He's playing a character again. Like, I'm one of these old school people that just prefers an unnamed actor, an unnamed voice actor, a sort of a character that is completely sort of, completely different. It's not recognizable. It's just a new sort of design, a new sort of person, animated or whatever. That's what I want. I don't want an actor. I don't want a Hollywood actor. And yeah, like that was one of the things I just didn't like about it. I feel like I confuse other people about that. I hope I haven't. But yeah, I just don't like Hollywood sort of actors in games. I don't feel like they're needed. Like, you can bring them in, but like, let them do the voice work. They don't have to be motion capped. I don't have to see every detail on their face. Just get them in to do a voice. Do a voice is fine. They don't have to look like the actor. But they have to bring him in. It's the fact of, well, we hired Josh Duhamel to do the voice. Why not we just have him? Why don't we already have him? Why not put him in a motion capture suit? Which again is fine. But I don't know. I just don't want to see their faces. I don't want to see the actor's face. Like, do Josh Duhamel's voice on a generic sort of character's face, and that's fine with me. But again, that's my opinion. Some people might disagree with it. And finally, on a not so good list, this game's very linear indeed. Unlike, again, I hate recommend like I hate sort of connecting it to Dead Space, because it's its own thing. But Dead Space allowed sort of route to, like, you was on a ship, and that you could go anywhere in that ship you wanted. As long as you opened up that area, that section of the ship, you could backtrack, you could go wherever you want. And sometimes there would be a reason to backtrack, because you didn't have the ability to kind of get through a certain door, or you didn't have the sort of phase lock to kind of phase any of the turbines, so you could sneak through them to see areas. So there was reason to backtrack. With this game, it's very one note. It's very follow this path. There's arrows to tell you where to go. And there are certain sort of areas where it's like, well, you can go off here and you get some loot. But whenever you found loot, you either come back on yourself and carry on from where you left, or the game would basically loop you around. So you'd go around in basically a loop of like, okay, you've gone round, you've got the loot, now there's a ladder in front of you, got this ladder, there'll be a door that was previously locked, it's now open, and now you're back on the main path and follow that path. It's very linear. There's no real sort of chance for exploration. There's no real sort of digging deeper into any of it. It's just the fact of, you go from A to B, and then once you get to B, that'll be the next level. So you get to B, and then you start off A again, and then you work your way back to B, and so on and so forth. And I just wanted a bit more exploration. I don't mind if it's still very linear, say one note, but I just want be able to go back on myself. If I went to one area, I want to be able to have a reason to go back to that area now. I've upgraded myself. I want to explore. I want to go to places I couldn't go to before. I want to sort of it gives me more reason to want to play the game again, to do a new game plus, to do another fresh run of the game, being like, well, this route I went left. Well, now I want to see what happens if I go right. Or if I go straight ahead. It gives me more playability later on, but because it's very linear, it's a fact of, well, I've seen everything, I've done everything, I've got all the collectibles, which I did. I've only got 2 achievements at the end of the game, which is to complete the game at its harder difficulty, and to do a special combo, which now how many times I tried, it wouldn't work. But I only got 2 achievements left for this game, and then I've 100%ed it. But still, there's no reason for me to go back and replay the game because how linear it is. So again, it's good. It's not so bad being a linear story, but without any real sort of branching paths or any sort of reason to backtrack. I just don't see sort of any need. And then that sort of brings me back onto the bad, which is that whole mentality, as I was mentioning at the beginning, of we will fix it in post. We'll fix it after launch. That mentality, I don't like that. I'm fed of it, and that's kind of, even though I played this game after the 2 patches that had come out, I still had a lot of issues. I had issues with the game soft crashed on me, which is basically where I'm following Danny through this sort of area where, like, I'm no spoilers, but you're following Danny through this area that's kind of falling apart. And again, the game was working fine, and I jump off this little ledge into this area. And the reason I call it a soft crash is because, unlike a hard crash where your game just stops completely and your console either shuts down completely, or you get booted back to home screen, this was a soft crash where the game slowly faded to black, and then I was just brought back to the home screen. No reason whatsoever. Then when I booted the game up again, I'd lost my skin because I got the day 1 edition. I got given a retro sort of armor and weapon skin that disappeared. So then what I ended up having to do was to shut the game off, eject it, start up a new game of a different game. Then I had to close that game, put the disc back in, boot the game of Callisto Protocol again. Then my skin was there. Then I could revert back to my old save where I got to, which was luckily wasn't that far back. And then I climbed back down, jumped down again, and it worked. But then I looked online on Reddit, and that was a lot of people had that issue. There was also the issue with music. I had this glitch with music where, the way I like to explain it, it's like the beginning of the game was highly polished, highly sort of like to kind of. This game was highly polished, and that we spent a lot of time on it, and that we love this game, and that it's to kind of suck you in as a player to be like, look, the game works. There's no issues, there's no real major bugs, there's no game breaking bugs, there's no problems. And it's not until you get to like the second half of the game where a lot of the glitches, a lot of the issues start to show up. Where it's fact of I had this one issue which I was playing the game as I played it normally, but at this part of the game normally just didn't work in terms of the music, because like I got to this area, basically you get these enemies that are blind, and that you are told that you can't make any noise, because if you make any noise they'll run at you and then they'll sort of grab you and sort of rip you to shreds. So you have to creep around and you have to basically stealth around, right? But they're blind and they work off sound. Now basically, that if you've watched A Quiet Place, same sort of concept, same sort of monsters, can't make any noise because they know where you are, hone on you and kill you, right? So you have to sneak around. Now, the game tells you to keep quiet. There are loads of sort of like notes on the walls written by other people, other survivors saying, don't make a sound, be quiet. So it's really ingrained, forefront in the front of your head, do not make a sound. So you're sneaking around, and the game gives you an option to stealth kill enemies, to stab them. So you do. And it's the loudest thing I've ever heard. Literally, like the creatures are dying as you literally jump up, grab it. Jacob's going, as he's like grunting, as he stabs the shiv into this creature's neck, stabs them in the stomach, and they die, right? And then all these other creatures just look at you like, I heard nothing. Literally, there could be an enemy right next to the guy you just stabbed. He's meant to hear, like, literally, the music in the game heightens up. Like, whenever you do something in a game, you know you've done wrong when the music changes and it starts getting really rapid and very deep and, like, drums. That happens in this game. When you stab one, the music goes, no, kind of the fact of, you fucked up, you're going to die. So when I first did it, I was like, shit, I wasn't meant to do that. And so I stood there waiting to be attacked. I looked around. No enemy, none of the enemies around me were coming at me. None of them were looking at me. And I was like, hold on a second. The music has just heightened up to tell me I fucked up. The enemy, I've just been told multiple times, don't make a sound, don't make any sound. I've just made the most sound ever in this whole area, right? None of the enemies attack me. But if I stand up from a crouch and walk slowly to the left or slowly to the right, I've got some of the loudest footsteps you ever heard ever in your life, and these creatures know where I am and then run at me. Then I have to fight 20 of them. It's the fact of, hold on a second, I've just. Your mate right next to you. You didn't hear me, but just because I snuck past and dislodged a pebble on the floor, you heard that, and that's it. I'm now dead. But the problem is, maybe even though the game lets you do that, and even though it feels like nobody tested this section, I kept getting these sound bugs where basically the sound would jut, it would it would stutter, it would and I was wearing headphones and it was really irritating. Constantly in my head, every time I'd go to a combat zone, it'd be and I thought, oh, maybe it's my headset. So I'd take my headset out and I put the volume up on my TV, and no, it wasn't my headset, it was the game. Like even I'm on the volume of my TV, it'd go constantly of like really high tension music. And the only way to stop that would be to leave the area out to get out of combat, or luckily if I found a collectible, I could pick it up and listen to the voice note on the collectible, and it would stop the music. But every time I got into battle, then on, it would judder, it would stutter, and it was only for that one section. But it was very much like I'm getting a headache. Like I didn't like. And you kind of fight these creatures about 20 to 20, like it feels like 10, 20 times. I must have killed like 100 of them, or more, maybe more. This section just goes on for so long, especially how you're sneaking around. And in the end, I just kind of gave up on sneaking, and I would just stab a few, and then I'd pick a few up, and I would throw them into the spikes. The spikes would make a lot of noise, but obviously not enough for them to know where you are for some unknown reason. So they'd run over to you, but they would just stop dead in front of you, just be like, oh, well, he must have he's not there anymore, even though I was right there. And in the end, I just decided that I'm just going to bat on, so I would just bat on my way. I wouldn't care if they heard me or not. I would just bat on my way, beat the crap out of them, and it just sped up the area. It would make the music lag kick in a lot more, but it was just a way to get that area over and done with as soon as possible. And it kind of brings me to my final bit about sort of what's bad in this game, was the fact of there's loads of build up in terms of tension, but there's no payoff. And like they've got really bad jump scares. Like I was only ever scared once in this game, once. And there's a moment in this game where you're in a sewer, because every game needs a sewer level, right? So there's a moment in this game where you're in a sewer and there's ripples in the water. And as you walk around, there's ripples in the water to make it seem like there's something moving in the water, right? It's to give you the impression that something's swimming, and that I'm thinking, oh God, I'm going to be attacked in a minute. Like something's going to pop up out the water at any moment. Because it's ankle high, but like there's something swimming around me. There's no payoff. No payoff at all. You get one enemy that jumps up out of the water, and he doesn't even jump up in your face. It's not even like a cutscene or a really scary moment. He just jumps up and and then you hit him and he's dead, and then that's it. That's it. You see other ripples in the water, and you can hear like gunge and gore and guts and bits of shit being mixed up because you're in a sewer and all that. But like, there's never a moment where there's any real high tension. They use cheap jump scares. Now, I love a jump scare if it's earned. If you earn the jump scare, you've got me. But there are no earned jump scares. There's really obvious ones. And like I said, I was in a resting heart rate this whole game. And this takes me back to my point, was what I was saying, is the fact of this is a horror game that's not scary. This is a horror game that's not horror. It's horror, but it's not. It's I don't know how they managed to do it, because they have everything. They have the music, they have the lighting, they have the graphics, they have the creature designs. You have the level design to a point where each level sets the scene of like, okay, I'm in the sewer, it's dingy, it's dark, it's grimy, I can smell it, I can taste it, it's disgusting. But they don't do anything with it. And it's the same with other parts of the level, where you're in sort of corridors and, I can hear creaking, I can hear moaning, but I'm not scared. I'm not terrified. And then whenever a character does jump out and get me, it's not scary. It's just not. And I'm wearing headphones, and it should be because I can hear it. And the way my headphones are, because I'm getting the 3D spatial awareness, I'm getting all angles of full sort of ambient sort of surround sound of like I can hear every footstep, I can hear every sort of movement, I can hear if somebody's close, I can hear if somebody's far away. I was in the zone. I played this game in the dark, okay? Because that's the only way to play a horror game is in the dark with headphones, all right? I did it properly, and even then I wasn't scared. But the only time I was scared was because I had to make up my own fear that I was going to be attacked. And I was only attacked once. After that, I was never attacked. Like, so all the tension was there, but there was no payoff. It's like you got me to the edge. I was close to, just exploding with a huge nerdgasm of explosion. I was about to splooge. I hate to use that really disgusting word, but I was ready to go. But then you stopped. You blue balls me. I was blue ballsed. You know what I mean? So it's the fact you got me to the edge and then you just stopped. And it's the fact of what was the point? What was the point building the tension? What was the point building, the fear and the suspense if you're not going to do anything with it? And then when you finally get around to doing something with it, when you have these jump scares, they're cheap. You have creatures that you have creatures that jump out at you at boxes. And at the first time, yeah, it's a bit but then you just know that every time you go into a box, 9 times out of 10, there's probably going to be something in there. And it's that constant of like, oh, look, it's a face hugger. Okay, I've got to stab it a few times. Okay, done it. And then you have these little penis monsters where like you walk into a room and they'll just like dart at you. And then you've got like a head on like a big massive like tube. That is just like he's biting you, and then you have to stab this tube, and then eventually it coils back, and then you stamp on this little foreskin thing on the ground. And against the fact of you do it so many times that it's wasted. It's no longer scary. It never was scary, but it's no longer has any potential of being scary because you've overly used it. So, I don't know how they managed to do it because everything there was for them to make this game horrific, to make it generally heart-poundingly scary. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't want to be terrified so much that I don't play it and complete it, but I want to be scared enough where it's the fact of I'm terrified, but I'm still enjoying myself. Like Dead Space, I'm terrified, but I'm having fun. You know what I mean? That's what I want. I don't want the blue balls suspension of tension not to have any payoff, where I end up having to make my own fear to scare myself just so, the game's a bit more sort of spooky. You know what I mean? Like, it should be terrifying, but it isn't. And I don't understand. I really don't understand. But before we go to my special mention and my overall thoughts, I want to take one more quick break, and then, we'll wrap it all up. So I see you after the break. Right, so we're back. Well, I just want to do a special mention before we get into the overall thoughts. Again, it's not really that important, and it'll only really matter to a small percentage of anybody who listens to this. But I just wanted to mention it because it was something that it's not that many people think about, and it's not something that really gets added into many games. But when it does, I like to sort of give sort of thought to it. Is that they added in a dyslexia text into the game. Now, anybody who doesn't know, I am dyslexic. I've got dyslexia, dyscalculia, and dyscalculia. So I've got all 3 of the learning disabilities, as well as a potential bit of autism as well. And I like to read subtitles in video games. No matter what game it is, I like to have subtitles on because I like to read, even though I can hear it, I just like to read as I go through. And I can read the text, but I like it whenever a game gives the option of a dyslexia text, which I can't really explain what dyslexia text looks like. It's just, it's a font that is done in such a way that is easy on the eyes and onto the brain of a dyslexic. And it just kind of, I turned it on as I played the game, and it was just made it a bit more easier for me to read. Like I've played the game a bit without it on, and I could read the game fine, but it just seemed to transition and be a lot more smoother with the text on it. Again, it's not important. Most players aren't even going to know that the feature exists. I just want to mention it because it's something nice just to see added in and to be thought about by the developers. So I just wanted to do a special mention there. Um, as for my overall thoughts, I did it despite sort of the bad and the not so good. I did enjoy my time with this game. As I mentioned, I enjoyed the story, and I would play a sequel or any sort of story DLC because what I feel with this game is the fact of it has a strong foundation. Like it knows what it is and it knows what it's trying to do. It just at certain parts it fell through, and that's fine. Like I didn't want when I started doing thinking about this review and while I was playing the game, I didn't want to be too harsh, mainly because it's a brand new studio. This is their first game, right? Now, if this was their second or third game, then I'd probably sit there and go, hold on a second, I have to be a bit rough here, But this is their first game, their first studio, their first time actually making a really big sort of AAA sort of experience. I don't want to judge them too harshly, and I feel like they've laid the foundations here, and the foundations are strong. Like I said, they know what they are, they know what they're doing. It's just certain small things, they've missed out on. For some unknown reason, they made a horror game that's not scary, but that's fine. I just hope that for the sequel, they build upon the melee, they build upon the dodging mechanic. Maybe I would take it out or sort of improve it, right? They add in a lot more creature designs, maybe a lot more sort of monsters. They sort of do better. They kind of do better to heighten the tension. So they're already there of creating the tension, just kind of have more payoff in terms of have the jump scares actually be scary, actually work. Don't sort of have constant jump scares and try to funnel them down my throat. The reason why a jump scare works is because you have what's called a leap and a bound, right? You have the crescent and you have the subcrescent, which is basically you have the tension as it rises, and then when we get to the very top of the peak, that's when you have the jump scare because we spend all that time building the tension, getting me on the edge of my seat. Then you do the jump scare, then you scare me, and then you let my heart rate go down. So you have the fall. So you have the rise and the fall. So we've just done a rise, we've had the jump scare. Now you have a moment where the tension's still there a little bit. I'm still on edge, but my heart rate's going down and I'm getting calmer. And then you can have me calm and have me chilled out for quite a bit. And you might have a cut scene here or there, and you might have moments where I feel safe. I can sort of sell things and upgrade my weapons, little small calm moments where I'm like, okay, I'm safe here, I'm getting stronger, I'm getting powerful. And then you start to raise the tension again, like a roller coaster. You start to raise the tension again. You take me out onto a peak, you scare me maybe one or two times, maybe you make me think I'm going to be terrified, but then don't. And then when my heart rate comes down a bit, then quickly jump up and scare me. You know what I mean? Like it's all about leaps and bounds and up and down. It's all about just keeping me at that sort of level where I'm constantly on edge, constantly scared. Even when I'm in safety, I know that as soon as I leave this room, I'm in danger, right? So that's all they have to do. Now, I'm not a sound engineer. I never did anything to do with sound. I just know with game design and with most things, really, it's all about building tension. That if you're going to do horror, you've got to build it. And if you build it and have no payoff, then the player, as I was, for the rest of the game, just knows that you're not going to pay off. So when you do try to pay it off with a jump scare, it's not scary because at this point I've gotten used to the fact, to the truth, which is you aren't going to scare me. That I'm just not terrified. No matter what you do, you're not going to terrify me. So I feel like if they work on that and they work on a few other things and they build off the good and sort of push back the bad, then I think it would be a good game. Like I said, I'd be interested in a sequel. I would play a sequel. The story DLC, again, if they focus more on actually making Jacob a lot more human, like if they take Jacob where he is at the end of the game and they carry on with that, then I might end up being more interested in Jacob and I might be more interested in Danny's character. Because they do, by the time you get to the end of the game, you do care a bit more about these characters. The problem is, by the time it just ends. But again, the issue also with Danny is the fact of because Danny was a knobhead to you for most part of the game. By the time the game tells you to care about her, and you are starting to care about her, the game ends. So the fact if I just want them to build off that story, it's the fact if you have the characters, you've got them to the point. If you're going to do story DLC, take me further, take me deeper into these characters, make me care about them. So by the end of the only story expansion you do, or if you're going to do 2 or 3 or however many they do, right? By the end of that expansion, the end of that game, I'm like, you know what? I understand these characters. I understand their motives. I care about them. I don't want them to die. I want to keep them alive. Because at the moment, as it stands, I didn't care about Jacob. I only kept him alive just to kind of see how the game ended. But any other time, I wouldn't want to keep him alive. I want to keep Elias alive. Elias is an interesting character. And it's kind of interesting the fact of Elias is the most interesting one, but you only ever hear him, you only see him a few times in person, and the rest of the time you hear him in your ear, through comms where he's talking to you, being like, "Oh, go through this door, go through that door. I'll see you on the other side." Like, how is it that you can make a character seem so human and so interesting when you hardly see them? And that's just on good writing. Not Ezekiel. Elias had good writing. He was an interesting character. And so that's what I want. I just want them to build off what was good, forget about the bad, don't rush the expansion, make sure it comes out working, there's no glitches, no errors, nothing like that, and just make it sort of more interesting. Now, they have said for February that they're going to release a patch, and one of the big things of this patch is going to be a new game plus mode. I just wanted to kind of be honest and open about my feelings on that. When it comes out, I will not be replaying the game. I will not replay it because, like I said, the game's very linear. I got majority of the upgrades going through. The only upgrades I didn't get were for the weapon schematics, which is basically you can find weapon schematics throughout the game. You don't get an achievement for finding them all for some unknown reason. But you find these weapon schematics and they will like unlock assault rifles and like a skunk gun, which is like a miniature sort of shotgun. You can find them early on in the game and they'll help out a lot. I unlocked the schematics, but I never bought any of them because I spent all my money on upgrades or the weapons that I needed. So apart from those guns and upgrading them, there's no reason again to go through it to collect more credits to upgrade them. I got all the collectibles as well going from my first playthrough. So again, I have no reason to go through then. Again, like I said, the game's very linear. So unless in the new game plus they bring in new achievements, new sort of, or maybe if they bring in sort of like new game plus, but sort of Jacob is infected, so that you constantly have to keep healing yourself. You constantly have to keep finding health because you're slow. The virus is infecting you slowly, and that if you let Jacob's health go down, he turns into one of the monsters. Some sort of game mechanic to make the game interesting, to give me a reason to go back and be like fact of, Jacob's infected, but you've got all your upgrades from your prior game, so now you're a walking tank, but you are dying slowly. So it's the fact of I'm a tank, but I'm also got to be careful because my health's going down, that I can't afford to take hits. I can dish out hits, I just can't afford to take them, because if I take them, that means I've got less time to find a health syringe or stuff like that. Give me a reason to go back, but as of yet, it just feels like a new game plus mode as standard, which really should have came with the game as standard at launch, but didn't. But it is coming this February. But as of now, I will be completely honest. I have uninstalled the game from my Xbox because again I finished it. I've only got 2 achievements, but I have no real interest of actually playing through the game, New Game Plus, or in maximum security difficulty, because there's nothing more. There's no reason for me to. So, what I will do is when the story DLC, story expansions get released, I will sort of buy them and I'll reinstall the game and I'll play through the game again with the new story expansions. As for the story as it is now, I played it, completed it, done it, that's it, move on. So yeah, overall, I enjoyed this game. I enjoyed my time with it. I think I enjoyed it a lot more than most people did. It's not a masterpiece. It's not a bad game. It's not terrible. It's better. It's in between good and great. There are things in it that are great, there are things that are good, and there are things that are bad. If I had to give it a rating out of 10, I'd give it a for what it is of what I've played with the patches, because again I didn't play it day one. I played it since two patches. I would give it a 6.5. As for what it is now, which is not bad. That's still in between good and great. You know, um, I'm happily play a sequel. I'd happily play story expansions. But as it stands now, if this was just the experience, like if this was just the game and this is it, um, then that would be it. I'd play it and I'd move on, which is a shame, really. But again, it's a new team, new studio. It's their first game they've ever made. They are planning to kind of bring in more updates and bring in more quality of life sort of features, as well as they're planning to do more things with it. You can tell they really want this to succeed. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I will say that I will happily give them another chance. But I will say this, and it's just come to mind. I haven't wrote this down. It has just come to mind that if they do story expansions, and if those expansions are really lackluster, or I don't enjoy them, or they don't expand on anything in terms of character or story, um, then that will probably diminish my hope for a sequel. And then what would end up happening then if a sequel was greenlit? I would probably wait for the game to come out, and I'd wait for all the reviews, and then just if depending on if the reviews are really positive or if the reviews are very sort of in the middle, then it would sort of matter between if I buy the game or if I wait for a sale or I don't bother at all. But it all just depends on those, for me personally, those expansions. But yeah, overall 6.5, not a bad game, not masterclass, pretty fun, sort of good, greatish sort of game. Would recommend it. If you're squeamish, you don't like gore, probably not for you. If you're not playing it because it's a horror, don't worry, it's not scary at all. Trust me. They try to be, but they're not. But yeah, overall, I recommend it. That's all I can say. So yeah, so that's been my sort of thoughts and views on the Callisto Protocol. Let me know what you think. But we're going to go to the end now to wrap things up. So I will see you in a mo. So here we are at the end of my very first season 2 episode. What a wild ride this is going to be for the rest of 2023. But yeah, like I said, I enjoyed my time with Callisto Protocol. I hoped for better, but I liked what we got. I just hope now, whatever they do next, they build upon it and just kind of improve the game from here on. And I think they can do it. I think they are capable of doing it. I think this is just sort of pre-game jitters. Like, this is their first time ever doing it. This is the first sort of try at a big AAA sort of game. All companies have jitters. All companies have sort of these bumps in the road. But I feel like they know what they're doing. They just sort of they need another go at it. And I feel like whatever they do with the expansions and whatever they do with the sequel, probably can polish out a lot of those bumps and lumps and bumps. So I have faith in Striking Distance Studio to really sort of prevail on that aspect. But that's what I think. What do you think? Let me know on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod if you liked the review, or if you agree with me or you disagree. Please, I want to hear your thoughts and feelings. Your feedback does help greatly. It helps me definitely craft what I do here as well. Also, if you listen to this you can listen to this podcast on Spotify. You can listen to this on Anchor, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcasts, on Audible, on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share all that if you're listening on YouTube. Also, if you listen to this on Spotify, don't forget to give me a star rating. Underneath my profile on Spotify, there'll be stars. Click on them stars. You're given the chance between 5 stars and 1 star. 5 stars, best thing you ever heard in your life. You want to take it to dinner and give it nice, rich juicy lobster. 1 star is Vogon's doing poetry, your ears are bleeding and you want to die. Whatever you feel like is fair, 1 to 5 stars will help me greatly. The way it works on Spotify, the higher I am with star rating, the higher that my podcast gets shown, and that the more people can hear it, and then more things I can do for you folks in the future. So, yeah, that has been me for today. Talk about Callisto Protocol. Thank you for joining me, you wonderful, lovely beans. And I will see you all in the next episode. So, as always, you've been listening to me, your host, Luke. Thank you for tuning into the Nerdstalgic Podcast, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye, my lovely beans.